that.
Recording in progress.
All right, so welcome to our 8th and final career chat for the fall semester. We have a really great topic this week is entrepreneurship. And with us, we have a special guest, Ross Bundy. He is the founder and chief production officer at Cardea Bio. He's also a graduate of our MBA program here at SDSU. Ross, thank you so much for joining us today.
Great for having me.
Yeah. We have 5 of our master's students from the business school joining us today. They'll have an opportunity to do questions and answers afterwards. So just to get started, Ross, what is your experience in entrepreneurship? Rowdy question.
That's a super big question. Maybe to say a little bit about Cardea and what we're doing. We make what we call a BPU. So most people know what a CPU is. Intel makes those and various other companies, and people know what a GPU is. We make what we call biosignal processing unit. It's a semiconductor chip that can actually measure and see the signals of what's going on in your body and life and all the different biology that exists around us. And we're very much a chip company. So just like Intel, you've probably never bought anything from Intel, but you've probably bought a lot of products that exist because of what Intel does. So that's our model. We partner with companies who understand the different needs and problems where a sensing product with biology would be a new value add capability. So expect, as we go, that over the next several years, you'll be using products or be impacted on products that are empowered or powered by Cardea through our BPU, but mostly sold by other companies.
Great. And how did you know that you wanted to get into that area as an idea?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. A lot of what I do is networking and using the resource I have through my history. And I've been fortunate to work with a lot of people in different fields. And in this case, my co-founder, we started a company about 8 years ago, but he and I have actually known each other since high school. He went the physics route, started working with the underlying technology with his PhD and a postdoc. And he and I got together, and both of us had reached a point in our careers where we're saying, we've worked for big, very bureaucratic entities, and it was good, but this isn't really fit. We really think there's a better way to do things. We want to try something on our own. And we kind of kicked around a few ideas, and we kind of settled on this technology that he'd been working on. He worked on a few different things, but we really liked this one because both of us were interested in doing something that, beyond just, making a profit or making a good return for us, but really had, some value to people and more of a humanitarian level, right? And we started out the company initially thinking we focus on diagnostics. Very quickly, you start realizing that working in science to say that being an entrepreneur is almost the purest form of the scientific process. You start with an idea, I think this is going to work. You go to market, and the market will unashamedly tell you how much they value what you have. And then you learn from that and adjust and rearrange what you're doing and try to find that fit to really bring it to where that value is. Diagnostics got a little bit tricky from a macroeconomic perspective. So we focused on a couple of tools, but we always had these people come together saying, boy, your tech would look great for this application or that application or that application. We're like, we really should focus. We can't do everything. But it's happening so often that we were able to, we actually worked with some people we knew really well, combined our companies together, where they knew a lot about the biology side on top of our chips, put those knowledges together and built a commercial model that allowed us to do all those applications for partner. And therefore we didn't have to do any of them. And that really hit really well. We have a little over 400 companies now that have come to us in our pipeline wanting to build products for a host of markets, some we've never even heard of. We didn't realize were markets, but as we started learning, like, wow, this is actually a really amazing market, that's gone really well. But it took a lot of years to kind of figure out that space, and it can be a challenge sometimes.
Good. What was it like getting Cardea Bio started? That wasn't even the original name of the company.
No.
What was the process to getting, from where you first had the inception, the idea with your buddy from high school to getting to now? What was that journey?
Yeah, so when we started, we weren't the first ones to come up with this idea. This is a technology that has been heavily invested in academic circles. Somewhere around $20 billion have been poured into over 20 years trying to make a technology like this work. And a lot of companies formed trying to do this, and all of them failed. And so we said, oh, this is a really great place for us to start. And let's do, we looked at them, a lot of them raised a lot of money, built these one-off devices, published a paper, said, hey, this is great and it's relevant. And they couldn't quite come over the hurdle of manufacturing, of showing consistency, of really proving that there was a value in this type of technology to the things they were purporting to say that there was a value. The markets weren't really agreeing with them. We said, okay, maybe we'll do something different. Let's raise no money. And so I joke our wives were our biggest investors because their salaries put food on the table and roof over our heads for a year while we took no salary and tried to figure out, could we actually manufacture this, make 2 different lots, and they did the same thing. Then we could actually ethically take money and move forward with what we're doing, because it really wasn't real. We weren't going to waste anyone's time or money on what we're trying to do. And so that took a year, just figuring out our patents and putting in some of our own money and trying to figure out the right position and fit of all the different things we did. But we were able to actually successfully build that product and focus on production, which is usually the last thing people focus on in the hardware world. And we said, no, we're going to do that first. And that allowed us to actually start producing a lot of the chips, which made then we could produce very convincing information, because we could make lots and lots of chips, more than anyone has ever made in this type of technology. And that was good. We initially then conceived of a product and launched it. Really as a life science research tool, in many ways as an experiment, because the technology is a radically different way of looking at life science. And in that, we use that product to really see how are people going to perceive this product in this market. So you would think that a life science tool you sell on data. I can do this data, I can do all these amazing things. Okay, great, people love this, but that's not the value that people really saw. What we really saw was that there were these entrenched interests with these very expensive tools and very specialists who loved what they did. And that's usually what the tools we're trying to sell were selling to. And the people who were most interested in what we had, which is much cheaper, easier to use, to generate that kind of data, it was actually in, say, a pharma company, it was that guy's internal customers. And I had this conversation so many times where they just said, I hate that guy. He's always behind. He's always telling me I didn't do my stuff right. I send him stuff, I get data 2 months later and it's all wrong. I got to start all over again. I just want to do something myself and move it forward and make a meaningful impact. And then started seeing how that even when you're selling to a highly analytical environment, that the kind of human factors are really the values that drive that. This empowerment of saying, this person is a gateway or barrier to me moving my own projects forward. We could knock that barrier down for them and empower them to do things themselves and make more meaningful progress faster. That's where people really saw our value. And so it really helped us to understand that as hard as the science as we did was, the value was really in this more human factor. And that was a big kind of eye-opener for us to really show what we had to offer and how to position and message what we had to offer. And we use that today, even though we've moved away from this tools business. All of our partners are really interested in saying, you don't need a PhD or even a trained lab tech or a complex laboratory to do a DNA analysis that might make a meaningful impact in agriculture. If a farmer can know the genomic type of this fungus, can they build pesticides that could eliminate just that fungus and cause no side effects? But a farmer is able to do an analysis that today only a very trained lab technician could possibly do. So it's that enabling and empowering of a different style of user is really where the value a product, of what we have to offer is. And we've leaned very heavily into that, and that's actually been very successful for us.
And as the business person in this venture, you've worn many hats. You started out as CEO, but eventually you hired a CEO.
Yep.
And you've been CEO and chief financial officer. Now you've found new people to take on those roles.
Yep.
You have a chief scientist because you're not a scientist.
Nope.
What kind of role does this play? For me, I see you and I really admire your ability to find the right person to step into these roles. But from your perspective, what is your role as far as in finding the right talent to put around you to make the company work?
Yeah. What you find a lot, particularly in very kind of technology heavy fields or businesses or industries, is that you have people who are very siloed in their area of expertise, right? On a scale of 1 to 10, they're 8 or 9, but in all the other things, they know nothing. They're zeros. And what matters the most when it comes to actually building a company, the actual definition of the word company is a group of people. And most of us, when you're starting a company, you're thinking, I'm not being an accountant, I'm not being a lawyer where I can do everything, in terms of the value I want to provide. I need to bring people in. And so what it really comes down to overall is building a team. So I like to say, I've done a lot of things in my career before starting this, done operations, biz dev, finance, HR, a bunch of things. And I like to say I'm terrible at every function of business. On a 1 to 10, I'm like a 2 at everything. But what matters is that when you're building a company, generally speaking, you don't need a 10 in every case, right? When you start a company, doing your own books and getting QuickBooks online for $100 is fine. That's a level 1. You can do it yourself, right? But if you're going to go public or you're going to raise money from VCs, you need to take that to another level, probably a level you don't need. And so at that point, you got to recognize my ability is not enough anymore. The company's needs have gone beyond what I can provide. Now it's time to hire an expert. And then how do I hire that expert and how do I put them together? And I say, I have several people that I've been mentoring or looking to come get an MBA here actually. And I tell them the most important class you can take is actually organizational behavior. It's a hard class to take because it's contextually very difficult to understand, but it teaches you how to build a team that's effective and that you're not positioning people where they're actually going to fail or maximize their weaknesses and minimize their strengths. You actually learn how to build an organization where this person's strengths are complemented by this other person's strengths so that together they're more than just the sum of 2 people together and they build a bigger value for the organization. And so I have kind of a little bit of knowledge across a lot of different fields, and I know how to combine those things, and then I know how to talk to those people, and really learning how to assess when the company's needs have now exceeded what you're able to provide, and now bring someone in and how to bring them in, onboard them, and fit them with the other people so that they're experts in their fields and you know how to navigate and put them together to be effective is really kind of the core thing. So my title now changes all the time, is now Chief Entrepreneur. It's kind of a fun title. But what it really means is that I start new things. When we need something, I say, okay, and usually I'm given a task like, we need something that looks like this. And that's about all I'm given. And I say, okay. So I take it from 0 and I take it all the way to 1. And then, you figure it out and learn and fail all the time. I basically say I'm a connoisseur of failure. That's the best thing you need as an entrepreneur, is learn how to appreciate how to fail. Because you're trying something and that failure teaches you, and you adjust and you try again. And you fail and you adjust a little more, and eventually it succeeds and you got it going and it's working. And once it succeeds, then you say, okay, I've got it from 0 to 1. This is a model that works. And what you find is that there's really great people who can take something from 1 to 100. So you hire them, and you have them go take it from 1 to 100 and move on to the next thing. And so, yeah. So basically all I do these days is take a new project and keep failing until it works, and then hand it off to somebody else.
Well, that brings me to my next thought, because I asked you your experience in entrepreneurism in a way that's a really nebulous term, right? What does that really mean even? So what does define an entrepreneur? What makes a person an entrepreneur?
Yeah, it's not a job. It's more of a lifestyle. It's more of like an identity, right? You look up the salaries of entrepreneurs, so usually there is none, and it's really terrible. That's why I have all these other titles, but that's usually what I'm sitting in and building and getting the salary related to that and move on to the next thing. The key things are really an ability to learn and appreciate that failure as a teacher, and it helps you grow and learn and grow better and get something to where it works. And then a resiliency. It's a very empowering thing to be an entrepreneur in the sense that most jobs you look at, a company is defining the role and you try to fit into that role, but they're determining what that role is. As an entrepreneur, you get to define what that role is. You get to decide, this is what I want to do. This is the vision that I believe in, and I'm going to make that happen. And that's a really empowering thing. It's also a very frightening thing because there's no one to tell you, there's no one to catch you if something goes wrong. You got to solve all the problems yourself. You're going to get knocked down all the time. There's people who are always going to tell you that you're not good enough. There's people, I've had that so many times. There's people that are always going to tell you your ideas are terrible. You're going to run into all sorts of challenges. You're going to have days where it's just dark and you're not sure what you're going to do and how you're going to make it. We had a rough patch where we were struggling to figure out what we needed to do. And my co-founder and I, fortunately, he was with me on this, and we put together a budget and said, okay, this is the money we have, and here's how we're going to spend it every single week. And we need to raise money by here in order to make it happen, and we're going to keep that going. So we planned our budget every week. And that went on for 76 weeks. That we were anywhere between 12 and 4 weeks of running out of money. And
you never did yourself during the time.
And no, we were not paying ourselves. We had just enough to have health insurance. And I would say I actually didn't collect a reasonable salary until about 6 years ago. It's been 8 years now. So it's hard. And one thing that is not talked about a lot when it is about being an entrepreneur, because it's idolized in a lot of ways. Stories out there idolizing Bezos and Musk and Zuckerberg and all these guys. Those guys are anomalies, and honestly, all those guys also went through a lot of this phase too. But what you don't see is that there's a real aspect of even just mental health, of just the stress of putting this on and not having no one to catch you, not having a large company to back you if you make a mistake or stumble or fail. You've got to kind of, pick yourself up and stumble and fail and get up and keep going. And what you find is that resiliency and that just stubbornness to keep going, people take real inspiration from it. And more people will be there to support you. The more you just have good morals and ethics, good values, you constantly stay true to your vision, and you just keep going. That inspires people. And then when we ran into trouble, we always had people that were there to help us because we just kept true to our mission and kept going with something that was really tough. And it's hard. You tend to be very focused on what you're doing. And so all of your challenges are enormous challenges, and you're always struggling. And I had to make myself take time to go talk to other CEOs about their problems. And I realized, geez, despite all those problems, I never once missed payroll. Like, it's a hard thing to say, but honestly, that was the people I talked to who really understand it are like, that's remarkable that you've been through all those challenges and never once not paid your employees what you owe them. Never had back salaries, never once. I had many friends, started companies around the same time that I did, turned over all their staff 4 times, missed payroll left and right, caused, very disruptive and just, massive kind of almost PTSD from it. And it's very stressful. So, I say that also to be very honest about the mental challenges. I brought my family into it, the stress, you don't leave it at work, it comes home with you, and you're up late at night worrying about what you're going to do, and that affects everyone in your environment. So those aspects are real, and you have to be ready for it. But again, at the same time, that's the price that comes with this ability to say, I really believe in something and I'm going to make it happen. And seeing that your vision actually becomes reality. And that you can shape your own career, you can shape your own path and shape your own destiny. Rather than having, oh, there's an opportunity at this company, or oh, there's an opportunity at that company. Those companies are creating their destiny. It's like, no, I get to make my own destiny. There's no path where I'm at because I'm making the path all the time. And that's a part that I value tremendously. So as much as I talk about all these dark sides, I would do it again. I'll never go back to a big company. I would do it again and again and again, because it's also one of the most exciting things I've ever done. And I would say I'm living a better life today than I was when I was working.
I want to talk a little bit more about never missing a paycheck, because I do think that that's a great accomplishment. And when we were talking before this thing, it actually came up when we were talking about how you define success for Cardea Bio. Not missing a paycheck for the people that were working for you, that was a very conscious choice and thing. And I'm sure that a lot of sacrifices had to be made in order to get there. What does that actually mean to you? What does it mean to you that you have been able to pay your employees what you promised every single time?
Yeah. I tend to take a lot on myself. And I see that every time I take investor money, it's someone who has put their trust in me to put their own resources behind my vision. And bringing in employees, it's very similar. They're coming in, they're joining what we're doing, and we spend a lot of time talking about culture and the mission to get them invested. That this isn't just a job. Like, we're here to really make a real impact on the world, right? And they believe in it, and they've gone with us on that. And so, and even our partners and our customers, they're signing up too, and they're putting resources behind it too. And so, to me, that's a responsibility that we take, right? So yeah, it's an interesting conversation when your board is telling you that you don't pay yourself enough, and that they're actually worried about me, that I wasn't paying myself enough. And I'm like, yeah, but I could pay myself a salary, or I could use that salary to hire someone else who's going to do more things for the company. I'm still going to do the things I do for the company, whether they pay me or not. So, but yeah, it's tough. I did everything I could to avoid, I value empathy a lot in terms of, is someone coming in, do they know what their job is? Do I know what their job is? Am I positioning them incorrectly? So because I know what it's like to be like to be in a bad job role, and when it's poorly defined, and what I don't want to do is have to fire people, but I have done a layoff when I had to do it. That was the hardest thing, but ultimately, that element, what it shows is that to your employees, that you actually value not just what you're doing as a mission, but you also value them as people and their contribution. I spend a lot of time also mentoring a lot of our staff, trying to help them find their passion and their career. And we have a young guy who just joined us, never went to college, and started seeing all what we were doing. He's like, oh my God, I want to go back to college and learn science. Like, he's like, this is amazing. I'm like, I really want to go back. And like, that's one of the greatest things for me in that too. And a lot of our staff, either, some people we laid off, or some people who've left and gone on to other things, they're still a part of what we do. Many of them I'm still in touch with, and they say that was one of the best jobs I ever had. It really taught me who I am, what I'm capable of, and what I could be. And then they found that kind of position. So, and what that does is then they start thinking about what's the biggest thing that they can do to add value to the organization. So I don't have to tell them what to do. They catch some of the balls for me too. And that that makes running it a lot easier because you have that trust with your staff and the people you work with.
Well, your story really is inspiring. I know to me, and for all of you out there, it's Cardea Bio when you're looking for a job. I know you want to work for somebody like Ross.
We are hiring.
And they're hiring.
Yeah.
So to keep that.
We're also spinning out a company, which I'm starting, and I will be hiring for that too. So yeah, we're hiring a lot. Hiring right now is really tricky. So there's a lot of jobs.
And I think your story is really impactful for our students that are out there who are thinking about going down that path too. But let's shift gears a little bit to try to kind of put ourselves into their shoes now. Let's discuss your educational background. You came to SDSU, you got an MBA. How has that led you or helped you to be successful in what you're doing now?
Yeah, again, I lean on this empathy thing. I already talked about organizational behavior, which is all about how to build a team and how to be effective. But the other thing I would say actually is all the general ed classes are actually really valuable. Every company has a legal component, HR component, accounting component, and all sorts of things. And you're not going to be an accountant, but what you'll find when you hire an accountant is that they're going to have some sort of problem that really matters to them because it's an accounting issue. And you're going to look at it like they're speaking for you because you're like, I don't understand this. You're here, I'm way down here. But what matters, and then maybe there's a conflict between your accounting guys and your marketing guys because of what they're doing, and they used to have their own perspective. What happens, and what's valuable on where the general ed classes teach you is, you're not necessarily going to go be an accountant in marketing, but what you need to do is understand what that person's saying and understand the perspective. And also, you need to have some understanding of what's good at there. So when you go hire someone, you kind of know what good looks like. And so what that means is then you can say, okay, well, now that I have all these kind of perspectives and I've got all these experts in these fields, and they're coming from this perspective, they're coming from this perspective, but I can see where they're both coming from and find a solution that's beneficial to both and the organization as a whole, and find a way to find a good, resolution to a particular challenge. Again, ideally, you're going to hire people, not just engineers or scientists, but good business people, good sales people, good accounting people, and they're going to come in, and when they're really good in a particular vertical, it's usually at the expense of knowing the other sides of what they need to do. And they're going to come in, and their problem is the most important problem in the world to you or to them. But you're going to say, well, I get what you're saying, but you're going to have to give a little bit here because what's really valuable to the organization as a whole is this other element and find a balance that's going to make sense. So really, we spend a lot of time in our company talking also about the soft skills and human skills. And it doesn't mean, just because you're good at what you do, if you're a jerk and can't work with other people, you're not going to work well in our company, right? And so being able to come in and understand another person's perspective, even if you don't necessarily understand the field, and try to listen and learn and find that balance is actually really key to making a team work. And so that part, I would say, just that level of understanding of what those experts are saying allows you to hire really great experts in those areas, and then find what's the most valuable thing in this vertical versus that vertical and move the company forward.
What did you do as your capstone when you were
here? So I did not do 795 because I actually did a similar consulting project through cyber, through the international program.
So that's cross-border now. So the name has changed, cross-border project.
Oh, okay. And so actually what I did is I joined the VCIC team, the Venture Capital Investment Challenge team. And, I did that because I was like, okay, I'm thinking about the startups. What do VCs really think? Because that's a whole angle, every business you start has a lot of the same issues. A really good friend of mine who runs the gym I go to, he's not raising venture capital money, but he has a lot of the same issues about how do I position what I offer to get people interested, and how do I operationally get through this issue with the pandemic if people don't want to come to the gym or something like that, right? I knew I was going down a path where I wanted to go raise venture money, which is a certain type of company. And so I said, okay, so what does it look like to be a venture capitalist? And some of that is a little mysterious when you hear about it, or you watch shows like Silicon Valley, which frankly is more of a documentary than a comedy show, because a lot of that's really true. But it gives you a little bit of that hands-on exposure to what does a term sheet look like? What do VCs care about? What does the due diligence process kind of look like? A bit of a snapshot of what that looks like. It's actually, much more involved than competition in the show. But that was my capstone project. And in many ways, it showed me and said, no, this isn't that hard. It isn't that scary. I can do this. So so in some ways, it gave me a little bit of confidence to say, maybe we should give this a shot. I think we can do it.
And for anybody out there that's considering the BCIC competition, we are still recruiting for grad student team. Robert Schulte is leading the coaching efforts for that. Did you meet Robert when you were here?
No, although I come and pitch to BCIC for practice for the team all the time, and that was when it was run by Johnny
McMillan, yeah. So, yeah, John's a great guy too.
Yeah.
So think about that, the recruiting right now. Go over to the Lavin Center if you're interested. You don't have to take it as a capstone, but if you are graduating, you may take it as a capstone. So a lot of great options with that.
Yeah.
Did you work with the Lavin Center Entrepreneurship Center here?
No, I didn't. I talked to them a little bit. We were pretty lucky that we got into a different incubator in town, EvoNexus, but actually EvoNexus and the Lavin Center actually modeled on a very, very similar model. But I do know some of the folks there and I participated a little bit more coming back as a alumni.
Are you also familiar with our Zip Launchpad?
Only a little bit. I know I've met a few people that have been involved with the program. I knew a little bit when it was just getting started, but I don't know too much, directly about it.
Well, I encourage any of the students that are attending to check out both the Zip and Lavin because you'll get a lot more exposure to what we're talking about today and the ideas and concepts behind entrepreneurship. It's not something that can be singularly defined. There are so many different parts and aspects to it, and both of those centers are great at helping prepare. But with that said, those are two resources our students have. What kind of resources would you recommend our students look to and take advantage of while they're students here at San Diego State?
Yeah, the big one in town, and outside of you mentioned the good ones at SDSU. So I would say a little bit outside of SDSU, one of the big ones that's really worth getting involved in is it used to be called the San Diego Venture Group, and now they just merged with another organization called Connect. But they're kind of the main networking organization for startups. And I spent a tremendous amount of time. Their events are pretty inexpensive. You can go there, you network, and what is a really great thing to do there is go there and just learn how to network and learn how to do an elevator pitch and what pitches work and how people respond to certain types of language and really adjust what you're doing and just practice, and then you can see other entrepreneurs talk about different things. They have a lot of great programs, and it's a really, really killer organization. And outside of that, there's a lot of very small, different sized incubators around. We were talking about Launch Factory earlier. There's I think 10 or 15 actually, put my last count. And really just learning to get exposed to what's going on and learning from other people's experiences can really help you kind of move forward and just see what it is and talk to other entrepreneurs and see what it's like. It's both of those are really good programs.
What role did networking play in getting started, and what does it play now, as you're still doing business with Cardea?
Yeah. Networking is you go out and you test your message extensively with people. And you go meet people, you find all sorts of people who do all sorts of different things. And it teaches you really how to connect with people and how to make, how to engage them, how to get them engaged with you. What happens is over time, you start developing certain relationships that become, friends or professional kind of, associates. And as they get intrigued about what you're doing, what happens then is as you start networking with more people, those people start having their own conversations. Oh, I've heard about this guy. And then one of your professional associates like, oh yeah, that's really amazing. You should really check those guys out. As you start building momentum around what you're doing, that momentum happens not because you pitched somebody, but because someone else said, oh, this is the best thing, go check it out. Particularly when it comes to fundraising. A good portion of the money we've raised came from people who said, I put in this money, and by the way, I recommended you to these other people. That recommendation gets you 90% of the way there. Otherwise you have to do all the world legwork yourself. And it's kind of selling them and bringing them along and figuring them out, because people are going to trust what their friends and associates say much more than what you're going to say. And what you find is that I'll go back to Tesla a little bit. Tesla's an interesting case. They're considered by the stock market to be much, much more valuable than any other car company out there, even though they sell less than 1% of the cars that any other car company out there does. So why is that? And it all comes down to story and what people believe, not what they do, not what they sell, not what the revenue is, not what their profits are. It's a horribly run company. Operationally, they have so many problems. But what people really believe about Tesla is, and what they can be, is really what allows them to have that value there, right? That's very similar to how branding works, very similar to how a lot of other, many other things work, but it's that story and that momentum. As much as Cardea has the employees behind it and investors behind it, a lot of our success is coming from the fact that the whole biotech community is starting to be aware of what we're doing, and they're getting intrigued. And then they start saying to their friends at a networking event, I'm checking this out, that's really interesting. And they say, I've never heard of that. What is that? And they get intrigued. Now they start looking. And before you know it, the industry starts creating momentum for you. And that creates a wave that you can ride all the way to success. So that storytelling happens through, and it starts with the networking. Other people start telling your story, and they start being impressed. You can tell when you're starting to get good momentum because other people said, hey, I heard you guys are doing this and you've never met them. That comes back around to you. Now you know other people are talking about you, and that momentum is starting to happen. So networking is really critical. And then through that, you start getting people interested in wanting to join your team, the investor side of what you need, all the other sort of resources start happening because of you start getting a community of people starting to talk about your story for you and elevating that. And so it's really important to not ignore the fact that it's not just even your own community of people who are directly involved, but also their networks, and that network effect can actually elevate your company to heights that is more than you would do just based on operational or revenue. So it's really critical. It's really key to what you're doing. It can really make a huge difference.
Great. And that's all been great advice. I want to open the floor to the students so they can get their questions in. But before I do, just one last piece of advice from you. Anything else that you think our students should know as they're looking to go on to down this road or venture as an entrepreneur?
I went through a lot of it. I guess the last thing I'd say is it's addictive. You love it, and it like I said, it's not a job. It's not even a career. It's an identity. It's a lifestyle. It makes, the person that I am now versus who I was when I started is so totally different because of all the people I've met and the things we've done and the experiences we've had that, I catch myself now that we've hired, several executives who have very impressive resumes, have done really amazing things. And they keep coming to me and they're like, God, you just know everything. And I just casually just take care of things and do this and just make this decision here and move there. And I don't even do it without thinking about it. And you start realizing just how much you grow and how much you change in this kind of thing. And it bleeds out in everything else you do in your life. It bleeds into how you relate to your friends, how you relate to your community. Again, it's definitely one of the most exciting things that I've ever done. It's also the hardest thing I've ever done. It's also, in some ways, the most frightening thing I've ever done. I tell people, like, I actually see a therapist once a month, to kind of work on myself, because constant growth and constant change, never feeling like you're perfect now. There's always a new thing you can learn. There's always a new way you can be better. There's always a new way you can grow. That brings a lot of value and momentum both to your organization, but also yourself. And it's something that I didn't get in any other role that I was in before. It's definitely worth it. It's very, very hard, but it's extraordinarily worth it.
Stephen, I saw your hand go up right away when I was opening the floor, so I'll let you open up with the first question.
Long before you've reached the point to where other people are recommending that their friends that you, how do you engage with potential clients or other companies? How do you get them to know that you even exist?
Or just investors or anybody else.
You say there's a lot of legwork, but what does that entail?
There's one key skill when you're an entrepreneur, and it's a really interesting skill, and it seems really simple. In some cases, it's not. And that is, I just do it. No one tells me I can't. I just walk up to people, say, hey, this is who I am. People are like, what do you do? Particularly if you're at an event that, like SDVG event or Lavin Center, everyone's there who's interested in being entrepreneurs. You've already created that thing. It's a little different if you're going to an event that, like your family, and they're all there for family time. They don't want to hear all about your entrepreneur aspirations. You've already set the table a little bit that everybody's there for kind of the same purpose, right? So if you come in and say, look, hey, this is who I am, this is what I do, let me tell you about it, What you find, and then I know, I'm recording, I hope you see this. I remember the very first guy I pitched to, the very first time I tried, he's a guy in town. He's got a little personal fund called Blackbird Ventures. His name is Neil Centurius, a little short guy, fedora hat, and, quirky guy. And so I just walked up to him and said, hey, I'm Ross. How are you? He's like, oh, hey, I'm Neil. So what do you do? And Ross, and I said, well, went through my first time at the elevator pitch. He's like, that sounds amazing. It's never going to work. You're going to fail. And I'm like, all right. Well, I beg to differ with you, Neil. Thanks for being with you. I still know him. I see him around here so often and stuff, but I'm like, here I am 8 years later, I showed you, right? But you learn from that, right? What did I tell him that made him respond that? You see is that, and then I said, okay, here's the next guy. So you look at a networking event and someone's sitting there and they haven't quite found someone, they're trying to find someone good. Walk right up to him and just say, hey, I'm Ross, let's start talking. And you just barge your way in. You just go do it, right? And so it's interesting because I feel like as kids, we're all taught by our parents, oh, we have permission to do that. And we oh, can I do this now? Can I do this now? And so we have all these habits that we formed over time. But again, being an entrepreneur is just like, you know what? No one told me I couldn't do it. Everyone told me I couldn't do it, but I did it. I just said, no, I'm just going to go do it. So yeah, in this case, I just walk up to them and start talking to them. Before you know it, you just get good at it.
Good. Malia, do you have a question for Ross?
I don't have a question because I resonate with him so much because a lot of what he said is what I actually do. Like I actually went and enrolled myself in the VCIC.
Good.
Yeah. So, and like a lot of what you said resilient, and that I have that stubbornness in me. Like when when someone says no, I'm like, what do you know, bro? Like I know what I'm doing. Like, I don't need your comments or your, judgments to tell me if I can make it or not. So I think like, and that's what makes an entrepreneur, right? And when you said that, like I could like resonate so much with it. And I was like, God, like, is this like real? Like, because like in general, I expect everyone to have it. And it's so hard when you say like people don't have it. It's like hard for me to look from that perspective because like I'm like, why? Yeah.
Very few. The key then is to not just brush off when people say those things, but then ask why. Why are they saying it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's where you start learning, right? Sometimes someone's going to say something that feels very negative to you, but in some ways it's because of how you said it or the word choice you said it. What did you start with?
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
I told you guys today about Cardea. We make this BPU, and our business model is like Intel. That was a shorthand thing. Let me tell you something. We just launched that yesterday. We've been doing this for 8 years. Even explaining our company is so hard for all of us in our company who've been doing this so you can understand it. And how to get someone to say something where they say, that's interesting. I don't know what that is, but tell me a little more about how do you do that? And then figuring out that conversational path to engage that rather than come in and be like, let me tell you all about graphene biosensors and how I can merge CRISPR and all. Immediately they just shut down, right?
Exactly.
And so it's understanding why they say what they do. Why did the head of my incubator say I should fire myself as CEO and hire someone who knows what I'm doing as his only feedback to me for months? He said that every single time. And I realized that, again, in life science, there is a model. There's a traditional model of doing things, and I didn't fit that model. And so I learned and said, okay, if I ask myself why, we are trying to do something different. And the reason he's saying that is because I don't fit the typical situation. That doesn't mean I can't do it. But it also tells me that other people are going to do that too. So how am I prepared for that kind of conversation? Because that is an assumption that everybody has. How do I prepare for that assumption? I can't tell you how much I had to prepare for how are you going to compete with Theranos? Until Theranos got brought down. And then it was, how are you not another Theranos? I had stock answers for all those questions because they were big right when we got started. And, you always want to ask why, every time you say that and someone says something to you that's negative, that's a failure. Why did it fail? What happened? And how can you do better the next time? That's the key thing. And very quickly you'll see your growth path will just exponentially go right through the roof, right? That's the only feedback I'd say. Don't just brush them off. Why do you say that? Some of the answers, God, that guy's just a jerk. Okay. Sometimes they have reasonable assumptions and you want to challenge those things and address them.
Other questions?
I actually have few more questions if you don't
Go
mind,
for it.
because I'm really inspired by what you said. It's like what I felt was you could only explain 10% or maybe 5% of what you're feeling, what you're passionate about, what you have done. You could just not speak everything that was still asked. It was like when you said you've done something for 8 years, I could see that you couldn't explain what you wanted to explain for all the 8 years, but you had so much to say that I felt inspired. Like I want to be your mentee. I want you to mentor me.
You can find me on LinkedIn, sure. I really like helping people. The thing that took me a really long time to understand, and is very, very common, I think, for just people in general, right, is when you're really passionate about something, you love it, and you're like, but as humans, we want to form this connection. We want other people to feel that same passion, right? So I'm like, hey, let me tell you about these things and be like, blah, 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 all the way down, right? Here's this whole thing, right? But that approach lacks empathy, right? It lacks an ability to help them understand that they're at a different place in their journey. You might think of how you came to your passion is a journey. Where were you when you started? When you first learned about your business of trading construction materials and then going into kind of, you said it was healthcare services?
The hospitality.
Hospitality service, that's right. So, how did you first learn about this? And then what were the steps that you do? You know, we tend not to go back through that self-reflective space where we say, you know, you weren't passionate about it when you were 2 years old, so there was a point where you first learned about it. And then you learned a little more, and then you started realizing and started seeing, hey, maybe there's something here. And you know, and so you got to your passion on a journey. But every person you talk to about your journey is starting here. So if you're giving them here, they're not ready for it. And so a lot of what I just described about BPUs, you know, I could go on for hours about how graphene works and the biosensors, how the business model works. I can tell you all that stuff, but I'd just drown you out. I know, because I've drowned people out with that. Taking them through a journey and starting that, and you know, what you can see is you can. Sorry, by the way. What you see is that you can inspire them and bring them into your passion by respecting the fact that they have to take the same journey that you took, and they're starting where you started. And then, so if you think that, you say, okay, how do I just intrigue them a little to know a little more? No, let me tell you a little more. Let me tell you a little more, and bring them to your level rather than try to just throw them to your level, right? It's a really hard thing to do, but that is how you bring in disciples to your vision. And then they start taking over responsibilities and joining your team.
So that is how, like, when I am here, I came because I wanted to study technology because I had no knowledge of technology. But then again, I'm also here to learn something which is maybe common, but not common. Like, I want to learn how to decide. I want to learn how to value. Like, I'm very much sure when you said organizational behavior is one of the very important subjects. For me, it's like decision making is the very important subject because it takes brains to decide. It is not an algorithm. It is not something that is coded.
Doesn't take brains, it takes guts.
Yeah, and guts. Yeah, like,
I wouldn't say I'm full of brains. I was a B- student. You know, I often say to people, I had this like Hollywood view of scientists who are like challenging and risk taking and trying all these different things. Then I started working with scientists, I realized they're human beings and they won't make a move until they're 99% sure about something. And I'm like, God, like I learned in business development, you start moving when you're like, yeah, about 70% sure. I take risks. If I'm like, oh, I think this is right, I just start going. Decision making is an interesting thing. And actually, one of the roles I have, even though I don't have any official responsibilities, because I've built most of the company, I usually people come to me a lot of times for decisions on things because I know how all the pieces work. I'm like, this is what we need to do. Blah, 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 blah. It's not knowledge, it's not guts. What it is faith in myself that if it's the wrong decision, I'm going to know, I'm going to adapt, you know. And so it's there's kind of some hot topics. You get into the kind of the literature around leadership. There's a kind of a hotter topic that myself and our CEO Michael are really into, which is called emergent leadership. Sometimes you just say, I know a few things, I think this is the right answer. And what you find is that making a move and it being wrong will be a signal to get you to a right path much faster than if you spend time researching and understanding what you need to do. And so I put it this way, I have a general sense of where I need to go. I just start running. I just start making decisions. This is what I'm going to try. And I'm comfortable that if it's the wrong decision, the signals that tell me that that's the wrong decision, I'll pick up on those and I'll adjust while I'm running. And so it's a little bit guts and faith in yourself that you're going to figure it out or make the right decision, or you're okay with failing. That's one of the biggest things I try to mentor our staff with. I'm like, guys, you know, we have a lot of very good A+ students in our company. You'd surprise people, you know, and I say that they're very, very smart people, but they're afraid to get the wrong answer. They're afraid to make a move because they're afraid of failing. It's okay to fail because trying teaches and failure teaches. And so this is what I said, like, I embrace failing. And because it is the fastest way to learn something, to find the right answer. And so, like I said, I'm given a task and I'm like, okay, well, I don't know what to do. So this makes logical sense. Here's roughly a plan, go. And I start going down that path. And then very quickly, I'm like, that was the wrong decision. Okay, I adapt. That was the wrong decision. I adapt over here. And I just navigate my way through until I find success. And then I set up a model and I get it working. And I hand it to somebody else. And here's roughly how this is going to work. Go scale it. And then go work on the next. And so it's just being comfortable. Not making a decision is being afraid of failing. Embrace failure. It's okay to fail. Fail all the time. And because you'll learn so much. And then you just adjust. You just keep adjusting until you get it right. So it's a weird thing, but it's mostly a psychology issue about making decisions. And once you embrace failure, be like, it's easy. Let's do that. Let's try that. Is that the right decision? I don't know. We'll find out when we get there. Okay. So yeah.
Well, we've reached the top of the hour, and I want to be respectful to Ross's wife. She's going to keep calling we don't wrap things up here. But I really do want to send a big thank you to you, Ross. Everything that you shared has really been enlightening. I think inspiring as well. Thank you to the students who attended. I know you all were really busy, but you were smart enough to know making time for stuff like this can be a valuable thing for you. But I appreciate you being here as well. With that said, we're going to wrap up the video session. So I'm going to stop the recording here.